Let's confirm this. Okay. Yes, last week we had a discussion on what we call research design, research designs, and we said that research designs are a broad way of how a researcher will tackle a particular research problem. And we emphasize that the research design is like a blueprint that then basically determines what will be laid out in the research in the subsequent sections. And we mentioned about research approaches where we have qualitative research approach and then quantitative research approach and then mixed methods. And then we said that it is very important for you to know which of these approaches is appropriate. Is it qualitative, quantitative, or is it mixed methods? When we talk about qualitative, we want people's experiences about different phenomena. It is usually what we call it is thick in data. When we say it is thick in data, it's that we collect a lot of data. We collect as much data as possible, and then come up with the themes, and then communicate our findings. That is the qualitative approach. With the quantitative research approach, it comes from a philosophical view that there is a reality out there that you can go and measure. Okay, there is reality that is objective reality about the world and objects, and you can go and measure them and get numbers. So that is what underpins quantitative research. So you can't talk about quantitative research without talking about numbers. These numbers can be, of course, in terms of counts, in terms of proportions, in terms of percentages, in terms of ratios, okay, in terms of intervals. You can categorize that data in that aspect. Quantitative data. Qualitative data is more to do with the text information, which is usually about experiences, attitudes, and sometimes perceptions. Okay. So the thing with the quantitative research is that you know what to measure. You basically measure what you already know. You measure what you already know. Okay? So if you say to measure is to know, it's basically saying that if we don't measure, we cannot know. Okay? If I can repeat that. In quantitative research, we say that we draft tools to go and measure something. So that means that what we are going to measure is what we know. You're going to measure temperature, you're going to measure the mid-upper arm circumference, you're going to measure the number of customers that have visited a particular shop, you're going to do a lot of things. All of things you know that this is A and I want to measure A. This is B and I want to measure B. That is what we call knowing what you want to measure. But the phrase which is that to measure is to know is that if we don't measure, we will not know. In qualitative research, that is not the interest. The interest is not about numbers. Okay? That's a key distinction that you should know. So most of you whose research work I've seen so far are doing quantitative research. I've not actually seen someone who's doing qualitative research. I don't know why. It looks like all of you are interested in numbers. So with the numbers, we can do a lot of things. If in terms of healthcare management or public health, knowing the numbers is very important. Is knowing whether you should buy some medical supplies or not. Knowing the numbers gives you knowledge about whether the services are being utilized or they are not being utilized. You're able to know when a patient's visiting the health facility and when are they not visiting the health facility. So you're able to know the diseases in a particular community. So therefore, basically, numbers answer a lot of questions. Numbers answer a lot of questions. So we use quantitative research to answer questions related to disease pattern, related to patient behavior, related to the duration of a particular disease, how many days does it take a patient to acquire severe malaria to be hospitalized, days of hospitalization and things like that. So knowing numbers is very important in health generally. So that's why we use quantitative research. So what is it characterized with? Quantitative research, basically the overall thing is about objectivity. Objectivity is a concept that relates to I want to measure something and come up with an exact figure without errors associated with what we call subjectivity. Opinions, feelings, thoughts, those are subjective things. When I'm taking when I take the mark reading or when I take a blood pressure reading, the figure that you get is that figure. If someone else comes and takes that figure, that blood pressure again, they should be able to get something closer to that. So quantitative research is concerned with getting getting the exact measurements. I don't want another person to come and get something different. And because of that, we have these characteristics. We want people to be able to get the same findings as ours, and therefore that is an issue to do with what we call reliability. Reliability is about taking several measurements of a given parameter and coming out with the similar readings. That is reliability. And then the other concept that is also related very much with the quantitative research is an issue to do with the validity, which is that my tool should measure exactly what I want it to measure. Okay, remember the first statement? I know what I want to measure. To measure is to know. And therefore, if I know what I want to measure, I should use the right tool to measure. So using the tool to measure what it is intended to measure is an issue to do with the validity. If I want to take mark reading of a child who is below 3 years, I cannot use a mark reading of a child of an adult. I have to use a mark tape of a child for me to get valid results. So validity is about having a measurement instrument that measures what it is intended to measure. Now, having looked at all the validity, reliability, and things like that, we can say that to achieve those things, we need to make sure that we have a large sample size. Because if you have a smaller sample size, you're not going to have reliable data. That's one. Two, if you have a small sample size, you cannot say we can generalize the findings. Generalization of findings is that we can apply the findings of the study to a larger population. We can apply. So, or we can say that this data is a representation of a larger population. So if we say we want to find out the prevalence of tuberculosis in a community X, we cannot count everyone and check how many of those people have tuberculosis. What we could do is get a sample, and that sample should be a representative of the whole population, such that the finding that we get, if we say the prevalence of tuberculosis in a population X is 7%, we are saying that because of the sample that we have. So we use the sample to infer that the population is having a prevalence of 7%, prevalence of tuberculosis of 7%. So this is the concept of reliability, being able to generalize such that we can infer that therefore, since the population, since the sample, the prevalence in the sample population is this, the whole population prevalence is therefore the same, because we have a large sample size. We have structured the structured data and measurable variables. This is still to go back to the fact that we know what we want to measure, and we ask questions that are related to exactly what we want to measure. That's why we have structured, not very open questions, not questions that give us a lot of information that is not numerical. So we ask, how old are you? When was the last time you visited the hospital? How many times did you go for a medical checkup? Structured, straightforward questions. Okay? And then the other thing is the data collection methods. Of course, there are very many. They can include methods where you actively go and take the measurements, especially in experiments, but also sometimes in what we call observational studies. Sometimes this data is about what you have observed. How many cars have passed in the last 10 minutes. So you just keep observing and counting. Or how many times do health workers wash their hands? So you sit there, and as you're seated, you basically observing. But of course, you need to make sure that you're not influencing the behavior of the research participants for them to keep washing frequently because they know that you're doing research. Okay, so you can observe and then document. You can go and measure and then document. Okay, and this can be using a number of data collection tools. You can have what you call a checklist. A checklist is you visit a community and then you have your paper, say, do they have a toilet? Yes. Is there a hand washing point? Yes. Is there a rubbish pit? Yes. Do they have a separate housing for animal? And so you don't need to ask them to tell you that, is there a toilet? No, you just observe. That is a checklist. And then you go and ticking and say, okay, yes, they have all these things. And then you have the questionnaire, which can be what we call interviewer. interviewer administered the questionnaire. You are the one who has the questionnaire, and then you ask the participants the questions. Or interviewee guided the questionnaire is when the interviewee, that is the research respondent, is the one filling the questionnaire on their own. So those are the two types of questionnaires that you can have there. Analysis of data. Still remember, our interest is to have valid data, reliable data, data that we can generalize. Okay, and therefore, for everything that we are actually doing, we are aiming at that in research, especially using the quantitative research approach. We are aiming at making sure that any other person can come, and when they repeat the things that we did, they come up with the same findings. And therefore, even in data analysis, it becomes very important in entering new responses and how you are handling all this data throughout what we call research data management. And that's why we ask you to include what we call the research data management plan. Research data management plan. You include it in your proposal. How are you going to handle this data? So we expect you, under that heading, research data management plan, we expect you to answer questions related to how you are going to keep the data secure, how you're going to keep the data clean, how you're going to code the data, who is going to have access to this data, how are you going to analyze this data, how are you going to enter this data, how are you going to destroy the data after the research. Okay, that is what we call data plan management. You should have all these elements to do with how you're going to deal with this data. So the analysis actually also you can put it directly under data management plan as a subtitle. Okay, so analysis usually with the quantitative research, Excel, SPSS, Social Package for Social Sciences, that is SPSS. These are the softwares that you can use. But in this generation, AI can do data analysis for you. Okay, AI can do data analysis for you. And the limitation with that, the limitation with using AI could be issues of data privacy. But of course, if you collected your data, and this is also another aspect of data management plan, how are you going to keep the participants anonymous in your data collection process? So if you have kept everything anonymous, I don't believe that there's going to be a data issue, especially if you have not collected what we call patient identification numbers or patient identification details. Issues related to, for example, if we are in a connected world, what I mean, if our healthcare system is really interconnected, where I can get access to patient data using perhaps some systems, and then I can be able to collect data that I'm not supposed to access, then you would have a problem. So in such cases, issues to do with, for example, insurance numbers, issues to do with credit card details, issues to do with national identification numbers, these numbers that are on the national IDs. This is private. This is information that is actually sensitive, because you can have an insurance card that is also linked to someone's credit card. And then that someone's credit card would also have information that can lead you to their national identity card information. But for us currently in South Sudan, we are not connected in that way. You have your national ID, and that national ID is not really connected to your insurance card directly. Or let us say your insurance card is not connected to your MasterCard in one way or the other. So basically, that is if you are to use AI for data analysis, then make sure that you remove all this data that is very sensitive, and then you have data that is completely anonymous, and then AI will do the data analysis for you. Different AI platforms can do that. Okay, so you don't necessarily need to use Excel. And these days, there is an argument that AI is actually killing Excel. And for me personally, I make an argument that why do you need to learn Excel when you can use AI? Okay, so maybe you can use Excel maybe for security reasons, but perhaps it is better for you to know how to use AI as Excel. It would be better that way. Okay, so reliability is a concept that I've explained, which is that I've already explained that it is when I make a measurement and when another person comes and makes the measurement, they should come up with the same things. So for us to achieve that, there are of course several ways you can achieve that. That in terms of questionnaires, have what you call close-ended questions. Close-ended questions. How old are you? How old are you? Okay. Are you married? What is your marital status? Something like that. Those are close-ended questions. They don't allow the participant to meander. When someone meanders, what I'm calling meandering is when someone gives you a lot of information that you actually don't need. That is meandering. So when you give room for the respondent to meander, another person will come and ask them the same question, and they will meander. The two people who have asked the same question will not have the same answer. That is not reliability. That's not what you want in quantitative research. So when you're formulating these questions, please think about the responses that people will have. If, and I've seen this, you say age, you want to know the patient, the respondent's age, and in the respondent's age, you have 20 to 25. Okay, you have 30 to 35, something like that. When you do that in your questionnaire, this will create an issue of reliability, because another person will go and ask, what is your age? And then the person will say 12. And then for you, since you put this in bracket, during analysis, it becomes very hard. So for you will not really have a very accurate figure related to, let us say, minimum and maximum age issues with average. It will be very difficult for you to get that. So closed open-ended questions are much more better, where you have them filling exactly, or they circle a particular answer. It becomes more objective. Okay? So your result should be replicated if someone else does the research elsewhere. So what are the advantages? There are quite many. It is the quantitative research approach is or fits well with what we call the scientific method, which I explained last time, is that we are interested in objective results. We are not interested in, I dreamt that this drug can treat this. No. We are interested in objectivity. Okay? So objectivity is the essence of science. And then it is light to handle data in quantitative research because you don't have the thick data that I described. Thick data. Thick data is typical of what we call qualitative research. How is your experience in when you are in the labor ward? Oh, so the person will start narrating and say, when I arrived, there was no nurse to attend to me. I was actually hungry. I did not take food. I actually footed to come here. Finally, after 1 hour, a midwife appeared. Okay, she also looked very exhausted and was preparing to leave the duty. Yet, the other person who is supposed to come to relieve her did not arrive on time. So it was really very, very, very tough. A lot of messages, a lot of information, and that's why we call it big data in qualitative research. When we come to quantitative, it's about numbers. We speak numbers, and that's all. So it is very easy for analysis. It validates hypotheses. Remember, in what we call the scientific method, and later on we shall see at the steps. We shall look at the steps of quantitative research. There is a step of generating what we call a hypothesis, which we said it's a tentative statement that is made about the relationship between certain variables. For example, you can say drug X can reduce pain when administered intramuscularly. Okay, that is the tentative statement. You don't know whether it is actually correct or not. So you carry out your research and then prove it. So you prove it with mathematical calculations, what we call statistical tests. And of course, usually we use a statistical software to handle that part. So no biases, because you know what you're going to measure and you go exactly for it. You don't have emerging things that will push you away from what you are interested in. The results are, you can reproduce them, you can replicate them, and you can verify them. That makes them very good. The disadvantages are actually the advantages of qualitative research. Qualitative research gives the participants freedom and also gives the researcher freedom. For them, they don't know what they are going to measure. They may think they know, but it is not in their interest to actually exactly know. So that's why even their literature review can be conducted as the data collection goes on. So they give the freedom to the respondents to verbalize their experiences, and they give them a lot of information. Okay, so that means that what quantitative research cannot do is what qualitative research can do. Qualitative research gives you the ability to collect information around a particular phenomena, what we call context. For you, you are interested in the numbers. How many patients visited the hospital today? 2 patients. You don't take into consideration that it actually rained. You don't take into consideration that it was actually a public holiday. So you don't know the context of the 2. You only know that 2 patients visited the hospital, but you don't know under what circumstances did those 2 patients actually visit. So that's the problem. And that's why having what we call mixed methods comes in, is that the numbers are backed up by the context. What qualitative research actually gives. So for everything, you basically get rich information about it, especially if you use qualitative research. So we say it gives you a deeper understanding. gives you context, it explains the numbers. Okay? And then the other thing is that with the quantitative research, usually the research is carried out under controlled, what we call controlled environment. But that is a disadvantage because you cannot be able to observe a phenomena in totality if you don't observe it in its natural environment. Yet, qualitative research provides you with that advantage. Okay? So that therefore means that generalization may be limited because what you observed was in the lab but not in the field out there. And that's why when we are doing what we call development of drugs, one of the steps is that test the drug among people who are in the communities and see what happens. Sometimes the drug that works very well in the lab does not work very well in the community. So that's an issue there. But of course, you're dealing with a lot of numbers. Not everyone is good at numbers. So it's a disadvantage. Though this one usually can be handled by you may need to talk to a statistician, a person who is very good at numbers or statistics. And usually, and I want to emphasize this, usually, it's very important to talk to a person who is very good in statistics at the design phase of the study than after you have designed and collected your data. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. If you collect garbage data, right, in quotes, that is data that is of low quality, there is no magician who can transform that data into very good data. No, please. That will not happen. So, however good someone is at biostatistics or statistics, they cannot transform bad data into very good data. Please, no, that will not really happen. That's not that. So when we use quantitative research, we use it in many scenarios. If you think about healthcare organizations, I could be interested in knowing what kind of people actually visit the health facility. What kind of rating do they give us? With ratings, they're saying, okay, I'm having received the medical care at this facility. On a scale of 1 to 5, what score can you give us? Okay, you can use that. You can survey around and see what the opinion of the different health workers about the nature of the healthcare organization and how it is being run. Issues to do with efficiency, calculating the waiting hours, knowing which drug is being consumed the more, and a lot of questions. Basically, we can say that if you are interested in what you call descriptive data, what is happening in terms of numbers, quantitative can be used. If you're interested in what is causing what, that is what we call analytical studies. Interested in relationship between variables, or you're interested in what causes what we call causal and effect relationships in variables. That's what you're going to use quantitative research. If you are interested in generalization of research findings, this is not to say, and let me repeat that, this is not to say that you cannot generalize qualitative research. Okay? Still, there is an extent to which generalization can happen in qualitative research. But generally, If your interest is generalization, definitely you're going to go with the numbers, quantitative research. So just know that bit there. So if you're interested in science, whether it is science in terms of number of patients, number of doctors, number of diseases, number of deaths, number of what, quantitative. If you're interested in issues to do with opinions, experiences, go with qualitative. So what are you interested in? What you're interested in will determine whether you want to get data at a particular point in time, or you want to get data that is for a particular duration of time. So you need to make a decision. You need to make a decision. If you're interested about what is happening in a particular area at a particular point in time, please go with what you call cross-sectional study. Okay? If you're interested to know, your interest is to know how many patients with high blood pressure visit a particular hospital in a period of 2 months, 3 months, 1 year, 10 years, that is a longitudinal study. Longitudinal over a given period of time. A snapshot, exactly this time and now, that is a cross-section. Okay? And then, what is it that is happening? That is a descriptive study. What is it that is happening? That is a descriptive study. So you want to know what is happening. It's happening to who and when. Those are the things that you are interested in. The 3 W's. What, when, and who, and where. For example, how are organizations implementing AI? Or how are healthcare organizations adopting the use of AI in their operations? So you are basically interested in what we expect in that. You're going to say that we have surveyed 5 hospitals within Juba, and we have found out that they are using these AIs. It is the doctors using it. Is it the nurses using it? Why are they using it? Just describing what is happening. That is descriptive study. You're interested in knowing whether after reducing the cost of consultation, the number of patients increased. That is a correlational study. That is a correlational study. Correlation meaning what, for the 2 variables that you're interested in, what is happening between them? Is it that when you increase one variable, the other variable increases? Or is it that when you decrease one variable, the other variable decreases? What is the correlation? So you can have what you call a positive correlation or a negative correlation. Okay? So you can conduct a correlation study to know, after introducing the reduction in gym subscription, did the people go and exercise or not? So you have the organization has said, when you go to gym X, you will exercise for free and you will not pay. Okay, so what will happen? Is it that many workers will now go and exercise in that gym? So you're looking at subscription, one variable, and increase in number of people participating in gym or in exercises in the gym, whether it increases. So that is what we call a correlational study. And then we have what we call causal comparative research. causal comparative research. Causal, for us, we are interested in, is this factor responsible for the increase or decline of the other factor? That is what we call causal relationship. Okay, so we can perform what we call a causal comparative research when we are interested in examining the causal effect relationship retrospectively, going backwards and looking at the two variables and say, oh, okay, when the introduction of incentives in the healthcare system in South Sudan was done, the number of healthcare workers that were working with NGOs decreased. So you go and look at the data and see, and then you come up with an aspect. And then here we're looking at experimental research, where the other time we emphasized the word manipulation. You see the word experimental research, just think about manipulation, that one of the variables is going to be manipulated by the researcher. Okay, so you have the researcher introducing either a treatment, a standard treatment, and then the other treatment which is under investigation. Okay, so let me pause there for questions. Are there questions? I just want to confirm that I'm not talking to myself. Huh?
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Paul. I dropped my question in the chat box.
Go ahead with the question.
Yeah, the question says that in what ways can qualitative research be used to test the theories and models?
Quantitative research.
Yes. In what way can be used to test theories and the models?
Okay. Thank you for that question. And that question will be answered when we look at the steps of quantitative research. Okay?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Another person? Okay.
How about the roles of hypotheses?
The role of hypothesis.
Hypothesis in qualitative research.
We have not yet looked at qualitative research. Our focus is on quantitative throughout. Is that clear?
Yeah, sorry. I'm saying qualitative, yes.
Quantitative research. The role of hypothesis in
yes.
quantitative research.
Yeah.
So
yes.
We have two types of hypotheses. There's a hypothesis that we make in research. The null hypothesis, which is that you're saying, for example, an example of that could be that drug X cannot reduce blood pressure in a patient of this disease. You can put the disease there. That is a null hypothesis. The alternative hypothesis is to say that drug X can reduce blood pressure in a patient of this disease. Okay, why do we have this these hypotheses, they help us in actually answering the questions, okay, research questions, because eventually, after doing all the data collections and analysis, we shall come up with a figure that will tell us that we reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative hypothesis, or we accept the null hypothesis and reject the alternative hypothesis. Okay, if I can rephrase it in another way, you cannot calculate a figure whose reference you don't know. You cannot calculate a given figure whose reference you really don't know. So we have what we can term as reference. I hope I can bring it clearly to you that if we get a figure that is above or below that reference, then we can say yes, the drug works, or no, the drug doesn't work. So, and that brings us to a concept usually that we use that is called the p-value. Okay, so the calculations will be related to the p-value, and that is when we reject and actually accept. The p-value usually that is conventionally used, it is 0.05. So whether you get above, whether you get below, you will be able to reject or accept the null hypothesis. So if you don't have the hypothesis, then the p-value, what are you going to use it for? Okay, and that's why I really sometimes don't encourage you to state this hypothesis, because eventually most of you don't really calculate this p-value. So it's not a go-in area that much. Okay, I hope I've answered that question. So we go to what we call quantitative paradigm. Last time we talked about this, that what drives quantitative research is that there is an objective reality that is out there that the researcher can go and measure and determine. And therefore, the researcher formulates a theory about that reality. He is basically an expert in an area that is conducting the research in, and he usually that thing. It's always better this way. So the researcher knows the journey that they will go through. It is what we call predetermined steps. So that's why we have this proposal. The proposal is about laying out the steps that you will do in investigating about a particular phenomenon. And that's why we are saying that in quantitative research, you carefully choose the steps that you will take. There is no room for saying, I don't know what I will do here. In a qualitative research, there is always that room. And that's why we say it is iterative. Qualitative research is iterative in nature, meaning that you can always come back and adjust things up. So that's the same thing. You know what you're looking for. You ask the questions about what you're looking for. You exactly know your problem and where it will, the demarcations or the boundaries, and therefore the theories around the problem. and you put it very well into a conceptual framework, there is nothing new that is going to emerge that you're going to capture. So that's why the conceptual framework becomes very key. You have your variables and how they relate to one another. You come up with a tool. So pre-planning is very important in this quantitative research. You know the direction, you know the map, you know where the valley is, and you know how to navigate. So nothing gets you by accident. Therefore, for you not to be caught off guard, you know who you're going to ask, you know the questions that you're going to ask, you know how you're going to ask them, you know how you're going to enter the data, and you know how to measure what you are interested in. So your role as a researcher, a quantitative researcher, is basically making sure that your things are accurate. How do you make sure that your things are accurate? You know what you're going to measure and how you're going to measure it to make sure that other people can come and do the same things and get the same answers. So what's this cycle of doing this quantitative research? Quantitative research is here I've highlighted a few steps. I think let me take this step here. Okay, that it's like it is predetermined that this have to be this have to be that, and this have to be that. That is what research, quantitative research is. You can't. There's limited flexibility. Okay. You describe what problem you have. So you have the background to the problem, you have the statement of the problem, you got the research objectives, research questions, and then the conceptual framework, and then the methodology, how you're going to collect the data, analyze it, and then coming up with conclusions. That is basically quantitative research. But when it comes to qualitative research, you can reach literature review and then stop somewhere in the literature review and then collect data. As you collect data, you go back for literature review. Okay? And then as you do the literature review, it can influence the questions that you ask later. So it is not like there's a brick that has to follow the other. No, it's not just like that with the qualitative research. So the focus of you identifying the problem that you're going to investigate using a quantitative research approach is that the problem should be researchable, relevant, informative, reliable, effective. These are things that you looked at from the word go. Otherwise, you couldn't be having a research topic. So your research topics, if they were approved, they meet this checklist here, the criteria in that checklist. Okay. Still, this is the same process that I've just gone through very fast. Okay. What is the problem? You go on explaining what the problem is, and then after describing what the problem is, you go to literature review, and then from the literature you can have a framework that you may adopt, and then or a conceptual framework, and then go on to design the methodology, collect the data, come up with conclusions. Different ways of collecting data. Sampling is an important concept that we shall get time and look at. And even the interviews, a lot of concepts around sampling and the interviews, which I think we cannot go into now. So the last slide that we have is the criticisms. That it's basically like saying why are people not falling in love with quantitative way of investigating research problems? Is that for it is an assumption that the theory represents the reality, yet it may not be the case. And that's why with qualitative research, you can develop a theory or you can test a theory. But often with quantitative research, it's basically you applying the theory into the research process. Okay? It is detached from reality sometimes. It examines a detached reality. That's why we talked about the control settings. Yet qualitative is more like, no, things should be done in a natural environment. Limited flexibility, I've explained that. The conceptual frameworks that we usually come up with may not reflect the underlying issues about the problem that you're investigating. So you're interested in numbers and not people's experiences. So you're interested in technical details and figures, yet people's experiences can actually be very important. Neutrality is often instrumental rather than genuine. And then we shall look at this concept in relation to qualitative research, where you basically have to come out clean and say, in this, I'm the one conducting this research, but this is what my experiences have on a research process. You need to acknowledge the acknowledgement that your own experiences and personal biases may influence the way you're interpreting the results of the study. Here in quantitative research, it's like, no, I'm doing the research, but my influences, my opinions and things like that are not going to affect the research. That's the assumption in quantitative research. And that's why we're interested. The key thing is objectivity. So with objectivity, I don't put in my feelings, my thoughts and perceptions and what I want to measure. And if what I measure is this, it should be that. It shouldn't be about how I feel. So it's about being neutral, right? But sometimes that is not very genuine. In qualitative research, it's okay to say that I'm investigating the experiences that rape victims undergo through. But as a person, as a researcher, I've ever been raped, and this is what I feel. So it means that you as a researcher, you're acknowledging that perhaps there is a way you're going to interpret the findings in some way. So you're being very genuine about the research process. Okay? So the numbers may not be very meaningful. Numbers don't, we usually say that there is a story to every number. There is a story to every number. So if you only do the number, you forget the story behind the number. No, that's not enough. That's what people say. Okay, so that marks the end of this presentation. I hope it has given you some insights on what you will be doing